is just like most detrimental industry for meat and dairy to the environment and the things that it does and the treatment of the animals themselves. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I stop eating beef, but I'm more mindful of where I get it from. Someone had said something about that I bought 3 turkeys from 3 different farms.
And 3 turkeys from 3 different farms means it's time for My LoSo Lifestyle with Mary Schepp and her special guest today, Kim Nordin. Mary, Kim, thanks for joining us here today on 216 The Net, 216thenet.com. We're looking forward to hearing all about what you've got to tell us. Mary, introduce us.
Well, first, I wanted to say thank you again to Mr. Dr. Ron Masakawa. He was our guest last week for Holistic, and that was absolutely fabulous. My conversations with him says he wants to come back. He thought it was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. But it was a great show. So if you missed it, you can find it on the radio, on the website, on the Facebook page, the YouTube pages, all of them. But I wanted to make sure to give a shout out to say thanks to him for coming last week. And then this week we've got Kim Nordin. I met you about a year ago, and you're through different means, which is always funny to me how you meet people and how you come to terms, because you're a funeral director. Mm-hmm. So you're a mortician, and you're the happiest, kindest mortician we were talking earlier that, you know, you're the only mortician I've ever met. But when you think of a funeral director, you think of, the Addams Family or something horrid, and you greet someone who's smiling and bubbly and quiet and peaceful. And it's like, well, you're not nearly what I expected, but that's how we met. And now, through our friendship and through getting to know each other, you're also Kim of Joyfully Well. Mm-hmm. So how did you get started on the Joyfully Well process? Where did Joyfully Well come from?
Well, that came through a lot of different things, but back a long time ago in 1989 is when all the healthy lifestyle bread baking started. My grandma started it. Actually, she got it from my aunt who lived in Colorado and got started on it. So then just being in my grandma's kitchen up in Michigan, we would grind grains and we would bake. And that went all the way through, high school. And then I got married and got the machines for my wedding, and then just started baking on my own, and then would teach people that I would come in contact with and friends of mine. And we would bake and we would grind the grains, and that kind of morphed kind of depending on the life or the stages of my kids is like what I would teach. And then, jumping ahead a few years, I did go to mortuary school when we moved here to Illinois. And then after that, didn't necessarily plan on being a funeral director here in Illinois, but then was home and launched Joyfully Well, which was wheat real at the time, just keeping the real in, your breads in different wheat. But just teaching people how to incorporate healthy breads in their lifestyle, because bread is not something that you have to be scared of. It doesn't have to go away completely if you do it the right way. And if you use whole grains that you actually grind yourself and you have control over.
And that's kind of what I've learned, on my salt journey, as it were, it's not that I had in the beginning. Yes, I being an all or nothing person, I got rid of everything. I eliminated everything in my cabinet. I didn't throw it away. I gave it away. Because I probably would have cried if I threw an entire pantry of food away when there's perfectly good people who would eat it. But I did. I got rid of everything. Every stitch of salt within grabbing distance, I got rid of. And slowly learned that it wasn't that I had to get rid of it. I had to be mindful of it and watching what I put in my body and where it came from. So it started me on that path of finding all of these different ways. So I still, and I said it a million times, I'm not perfect. I still like my Taco Bell. I still like my, I'm a butter pecan ice cream freak. I love butter pecan ice cream.
That is good.
So, and Oreo cookies, that's my other vice. I love Oreo cookies. But it doesn't mean you have to get rid of these things, but being mindful of what you're doing, you can still have those things. And bread. So now through our relationship, I've learned that you make bread. And as soon as I comment on it, like yesterday, I comment on it and I find out that A, everybody in our community seems to know you. And B, everybody but me seems to know this big hidden secret that you're the bread lady of the area. And I didn't know it until now, which I'm like, what the heck? I sent Pam a message and was like, how come you didn't tell me this a decade ago? Where was I? We've been friends for 20 years and you've known all about this. And now you didn't tell me that I have a bread lady in my backyard. So now last night we made bread, which is fantastic. And that's my first thing that I want to talk about is people talk about time. And even my husband last night says, so you're actually going to make bread tonight? I said, yeah. Like you're going to be there till like midnight. Like, no, I mean, think of all the times I make quick bread. And even in my head, I was still thinking that the time to mill the grain and to make the bread and rise the bread and proof the bread and all of these things.
It's going to take all day.
And I remember as a little girl, I made bread once a week with my neighbor lady. We would go to King's Farm on McCulloch Road and get fresh milk, still warm, and come home and use unprocessed milk. And she didn't mill her own flour, but we would make our own bread, and it was a whole day thing. Mm-hmm. Granted, I was, 7, so it's probably, I probably contributed a lot to that whole process, mm-hmm. But we made bread last night. And when you talk about time of it, we did it in a very short period of time.
It's very fast. You can the batch that we made last night was a little over 10 pounds of flour, which is about 10 pounds of wheat.
That also boggled. I didn't realize that we were going to do like this huge bucket of flour, but it's fantastic.
I know, but to grind that, it's less than 10 minutes to grind it. And people would think, do you have this big thing in your garage? I'm like, no, it's in my kitchen. Right. It's just a little grain mill, and you grind it. And then to assemble the ingredients takes seconds. And we did let it sponge for about 5 minutes, which you don't have to do. Right. You can skip that step. And then it kneads for 5 to 6 minutes in the machine. And it really depends on the machine that you have, like right. The mixer. And then
I think my KitchenAid takes like 10 minutes, but it can't, my KitchenAid can't do
the quantity
that big of a batch. Mine can do a much smaller, like 2 pound, 1 pound loaves or something like that. It's much smaller, but for someone like me, as I continue on this journey and learn more from you and how to bake and alter the recipes to suit my needs being low sodium, and the fact that it's just me and my husband, I'm super excited to find and create those recipes. So I can't wait for that. But yeah, the timing of it, it doesn't have to be, a 16-hour, and there are some breads that's the case. There are some breads that, to the fermentation of the yeast and sours and stuff like that. So there are some of the ancient breads that do take time, but they also take knowledge. Those aren't beginner breads. Yeah, those aren't beginner breads. That's a whole other show.
Yeah, I don't have that patience to do that.
Yeah. No. Eventually I probably would, just because that kind of thing fascinates me. But that's to do just the basic knowledge of it and just the basic breads. You can do it in a couple hours.
You can easily. And it takes 20 minutes to a half hour to rise and 30 minutes to bake. Right. And you're done, and it's out and you're done. And you can make anywhere from 2 loaves to, I've made 12 loaves before in the same.
Well, that's last night. You made a focaccia. We made, 6 or 8 loaves of bread. And then the cinnamon roll bread that I have here, not cinnamon rolls, an actual cinnamon swirl bread, like you see in the store, which I had for breakfast, and it was absolutely delicious. Mm-hmm. Speaking of bread and time, I've said this before with my sauces. Because everyone asks, how do you make a pasta sauce or how do you make a gravy when you can't have salt? Because a lot of those start with salted stocks or salted meats or things of that nature, like a sausage gravy. Sausage is inherently extremely salty. Mm-hmm. How you make it. And you can make unsalted sausage, but it spoils faster. So you can't buy it typically. You have to go to a butcher or you have to make it yourself. But I've always said start with a mother sauce or a master sauce. And it's the same with bread. You start with a master recipe. And it can be somebody else's recipe, like in the book that you shared with me that your aunt wrote. Mm-hmm. It could be your own or it can be a modification. But if you master that recipe, I mean, how many years or how many generations have you been using the same master recipe and only alter it to put cinnamon in it or to put garlic in it or cheese on top or something of that.
Right. Exactly. Right. We've been using that. I've varied it a little bit. Like my sister bakes, my mom bakes, my aunt bakes. We all have a little bit different master recipe. I know my sister put oatmeal in hers. She'll grind oatmeal and put it in hers. My mom, we all have it a little bit different, right. And that's just what we're accustomed to. But you take that master recipe and you make pizza. You make pizza rolls. You make breakfast rolls with eggs and sausage in it and cheese. there's so many things that you can make with it that as a mom of 4, like we would, bake a lot and freeze, and then you just kind of pull it out as you need.
And I love that your kids love that. And when we did our episode on kids meals and prepping, kids are, and not just kids, people, it's the amount of exposure. So even if you have a picky eater, but if your picky eater always sees you making bread, then as an adult, if they decide they want to take on that challenge, it's not as daunting to them. Or if they see you make soup all the time, it doesn't mean that your kid did it or wants to do it, because they don't always. Maybe they're so sick of bread because that's all you ever did. But now that they're 30 years old and on their own and go, hey, I could actually do this. My mom did it all the time. If she did it all the time, I can do it. So that exposure might not be something that you see immediately, but it's a profound effect on your children and other people's children, like the kids you're talking about, the kids in your neighborhood.
They love it.
Like
kids come over. Do you have any bread, Miss Nordin?
Right. So
cinnamon rolls?
That to me is fantastic. But like a basic recipe is usually the same thing. It's the flour, the oil, a sugar, which same as you, I tend to use honey over sugar or any kind of sugar additives, a water, a yeast, and a salt. So that basic variation just changes based on, whether you use sugar or honey or the type of flour you use.
Or the type of oil even will change the texture of the bread.
Like olive oils, and it has a stronger flavor, even extra virgin light olive oils.
And it will tend to make a denser bread as well.
Right. So it depends. Like I prefer lately to use grapeseed oil. It's just a very flat taste. So I use it universally across a lot of things, but I still have olive oil and avocado oil and stuff like that in my pantry because I use it for different things. But now, like I said, with the differences in a master recipe, the big thing is grains. There's a ton of different grains. How did you come? Because you cook with spelt.
Well, this is whole wheat that we're using today.
Oh,
or that we did yesterday was straight wheat, and we use Wheat Montana is a farm in Montana where we get our grains from, and they just have their climate and their processing and their everything. We just found to be for
like
what
wine.
We needed for the best.
That's almost like wine.
Exactly. So we get our wheat from Wheat Montana. It's a Prairie Gold. It's a white hard wheat. So when you grind it, it will give you more of the lightness, the white that you're so used to. You still have, the bran and all the good stuff in it. Where a lot of times if you're looking online, you'll see people use red wheat for bread baking. Well, you use red wheat, you're going to get a denser,
like a heavy bread?
Heavy bread.
Okay.
So you have to kind of look at the grains that are available to you and kind of alter your master recipe to what grains you're using.
I'm very early on in the learning of all of this. And as, of course, true to my form, bought, a few books already. And my husband every day, like, there's another package on the doorstep. There's another package on the doorstep. And as I get into it and I'm reading more and more, because I knew about different grains, you hear about certain grains like a rye bread or a wheat bread or, things like that. But then I start reading, and that, like you just said, there's reds and whites and there's softs and there's hards and I'm like, this is literally like wines or cheeses where you become this connoisseur, like, holy crap, this is way bigger than I thought it was going to be, to try and find something so simple as picking a grain for a bread that I want to make. But I mean, ultimately all of it fascinates me. But and I was thinking that some of the places around here, like Fresh Thyme, might sell because they have their bulk bins, but I was shocked to see that they don't have grains.
Walmart used to carry Wheat Montana a few years ago, and they quit doing that. They would sell the bags of wheat by 25 pounds, and they quit selling that. So I would carry 50-pound bags of wheat just out of my home store for when people would want to make bread and everything. So I would have everything that they needed. And I am very more focused on like what I do. So I don't veer off into the red wheats. I don't veer off into all that because it's too complicated. It just opens up too many questions and variables. So we stick with like in my house, we stick with the hard white for breads, and then spelt, like you mentioned before, spelt we use for pancakes and muffins and cookies and anything that's baking that you don't need a high gluten content
Okay.
to it. Like bread, you need gluten to hold the rise of the bread and to
Like
make
pizza
it nice.
dough, with the chew
But
of a pizza dough.
You don't need gluten for that.
Right. That's
so you can use soft wheat for that. Soft wheat is more of a grain that you would use for cookies and pancakes and things. That's more of a pastry grain. See, there's so much stuff.
I know there's so much to learn, but it's funny because when we had started, my husband, of course, is on this journey with me. He's my husband, and he can eat all the salt he wants, and he does have pickles, and I want to kill him every once in a while for it, and I sneak one here and there. But early on, he had said something. I forget what it was that I made, and he said this would make a fantastic pizza. It's like, why can't we make pizza? Like, I've made bread before. And that one thought started me on the process of, okay, well, crap, bread has salt in it. How do I get the salt out? So how do I make pizza dough without the salt? So I ended up making a fresh garlic roasted pizza dough that turned out. And then I was on this, I love Pizza Hut, like that buttery, fluffy pan pizza crust that's commercially raised with a bunch of crap. Or commercially made, not raised. It's not a bird. But I went to try and make that, and we did. We achieved it. We used cast iron and baked it, and it was the most fabulous pizza we've ever made. But we had pizza for like 3 weeks because we made thin crust pizza and thick crust pizza, all trying to find it. But we did achieve it without salt. So now it's that same process of my husband's probably going to be sick of bread and cookies and pizza dough because I'm going to be making everything and anything I can to try and see how I can make stuff the way I make it, but with fresh grains, because it is super tasty. I wish, your proverbial cooking show, like, I wish you could smell what my kitchen smells like or taste what this tastes like, because it is really good.
It is. I have to agree with that.
Yeah. Well, you might be a little bit biased. You've been doing it longer than the rest of us. So,
but I'll text my sister. I'm like, do you ever just make that batch of bread and then you're just like, oh my gosh, this is so good, even though we've been doing it for 30 some years, and
brings you to your happy place.
Old.
Yeah. So it's funny because, like, you were talking with the spelt or the grains, and when you have that whole grain spelt, we were talking about the other day, is higher in protein and it's lower in gluten, which kind of it makes it a whole product that is more universal than others. So it's an easier flour or an easier wheat berry to cook with, I think, spelt in some of the other wheats versus some of the other ancient grains that, create whole grain breads that are tougher to make. So if you do start on the process of picking a grain and picking a master recipe, you want to pick something that is more universal like that, because otherwise you're setting yourself for failure and you're going to go, this is crap. They were wrong. This didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, because you go, I like rye bread, so I want rye bread. So I'm going to buy the grains to make rye bread. And then you go, holy crap, this doesn't mill the same. Right. Everything turns out completely different. Now, the bits to the berry of the wheat, that's the fun bit. That's the part where you realize that there's so much left behind when you process flour.
There's over 26 vitamins and minerals in a single wheat berry.
That's just crazy to me.
So when it's processed, in order to give it shelf life, all the good stuff has to come out, because
that's the stuff that spoils.
So like I told you last night, like if you were to cut into an apple, it's going to turn brown in the matter of minutes.
Right.
So you have to think that same way with a grain berry. We call them grain berries. As soon as you crack that berry, the air is going to get into it and it's going to start to oxidize, just like an apple would, but you can't see it.
Right.
So people, you can't see it. So it's not really there. But the vitamins and minerals start to die. And then that vitamin E oil, like the wheat germ, and the wheat germ oil is going to turn rancid rather quickly. So
and a lot of people
that has to be removed.
And a lot of people don't even realize with oils in general, you think that, you see a thing of oil sitting on your shelf forever and ever and ever, that they never go bad. And oils go rancid. So like if you have an oil that's infused with other things, even if you take an oil like an olive oil and you put herbs from your garden, introducing that external fresh component with with all the germs and the things that life bring, you now turn that oil into something that will turn rancid very quickly. So if you have that fresh product and the oils and stuff and the fats that are in there, that's the thing that is, it's one of those things where you know it, but until someone says it, you don't think of it like you said, like an apple that's going to go rancid once you cut that little perfect little shell open to expose the goodness.
Because it will last for years and years and years.
As the grain.
But as soon as you crack that, it will start to oxidize. And even if you were to get it wet, it would start to sprout. So that's how you know that it's a live food. So when it's processed, the bran comes off, which is your high fiber.
Right.
The middlings are another part of fiber. Those come out. The wheat germ comes out, which is where all your vitamins, and the oils are. And then the wheat germ oil. So all that's removed. And what you're left with is gluten.
Sawdust.
You are left with gluten. And that's why your body, it wasn't meant to have to digest just the gluten. So if you were to eat it, the bran has its purpose with the fiber. The oils has its purpose, feeding your blood and your body. Well, when all that's removed and you just end up with the gluten, that's when your body is like, I don't know what to do with this. It is too hard to digest because you don't have all the other stuff that's supposed to help it.
Right. And we talked about that last night with juices. People think that juices are good for you. The orange is good for you. But when you take the fiber and the proteins and all of the components that are in with that are digested as a whole, even when you chew it up and put it in your gut, all of those components make your body process the sugars in the juice slower. But when you get juice, you literally just get the flavor and the sugar component of the fruit versus the rest of it. And it's the same with breads. You take all of the bits that make it something that's nutritional because of its wholeness. And you lose so much, and you literally do kind of end up with sawdust. So if the gluten is 2% of what the whole bean is, and you remove 95% of it, you're left with 2% gluten and a couple bits of nutrients, and that's it. And
then things are having to be added in to make it enriched and to make it sellable.
Right. And that, it's funny, as I was reading, I found some articles that were talking about how early in the 20th century, when the milling process of flour became more commercialized and they were removing all of these bits, and then we had, health epidemics, the same with salt. And it was the same time frame when they started adding iodine to salt because there was a goiter problem. Well, when they processed all the salts and they took all of the minerals and components out of salts, and then that combined with food shortages during warfare or in times of that, it changed the nutritional value of the foods everybody was consuming. And then add that with flour, where you're eating white flour and you have none of those fibers or proteins or nutrients and vitamins and minerals that come along with it. It created some epidemics, and it created a lot of pushback. So then the government stepped in and put, enriched. So you have all these flours that are enriched, but they're enriched chemically, and it's only half of what you're missing that gets put back, but it gets put back chemically. So that's the next topic that the gluten. Gluten is the evil of bread, and it's not.
It's not if it comes in the whole.
Right. I mean, and that's first disclaimer right off the bat. That's not people who have celiac.
Exactly.
Celiac is no different than someone who is, allergic to shellfish or has an actual anaphylactic response to something. So it doesn't matter how much you remove. Celiac has to be 100% gluten-free.
Absolutely.
That's an actual disease. That's like saying that I can have a little bit of alcohol with having liver disease because it's just a little bit, and that's not true. There's certain variables, but the gluten sensitivity that has taken hold of the world is usually the perception to an intolerance to gluten, when in actuality it's an overdose of gluten and an intolerance to the commercially processed chemicals that are reintroduced
that are in it,
to make it a whole, or try or attempt, or veiled attempts to make it a whole.
It's the processing of the flour that your body can't handle, the bromate, the Yeah, the chemicals that your body wasn't meant to have to digest. And that's what's causing the problems.
Right. And so many times when people are like, oh, well, they're plant-based products, or they're that, well, it's the same concept. Just because you take the juice from an orange, yes, it is 100% from an orange, nothing added, but you just stripped out the sugar and left all the good bits. And it's the same when they add or chemically engineer or add these things back in. They can boast that it's all natural organic products because that's what it came from. But if they put it in a lab and the same as a grain, they strip 16 things from it because all of they needed was that gluten molecule to create whatever they wanted to create. And it's the same process. So it's fascinating to me when someone throws it in my face that, oh, well, it's all natural, it's organic, it's this, it's that. Or it's only got, 100 milligrams of sodium. Did you read the ingredients? Like, if you read through the ingredients and there's 17,000 ingredients on something.
And you can't pronounce them.
Right. Or the substitutions, sugar substitutions, salt substitution. We've talked about this, potassium. Things will say that there's 0 sodium. And then you read the ingredients and it says potassium chloride. And potassium chloride is the same as, it's not the same. It's similar to sodium chloride. Your body needs potassium to regulate certain functions, but it is also the same thing that they inject into your vein when you commit a crime and they send you for criminal punishment to kill you. The last thing that they put in your body when they, execute you is potassium chloride. Now, granted, it's a much higher dose. It's the same as like nightshades. Nightshade can kill you. And it's in tomatoes and eggplants and zucchini. It's all of the nightshade vegetables. So if you're nightshade sensitive, you're going to have, which I am, you're going to the same thing. So it's funny that all of the gluten epidemic is fascinating to me, because when you look at gluten-free products,
They're awful.
They're so loaded with so many other things. Like the laundry list of ingredients, and it comes up in our group a lot because, I'm gluten sensitive, and I laugh because I'm like, you're probably not, but have you read the list of ingredients?
It just changes the inflammatories
in
your body.
It's insane. And then it tastes like crap. And to get it to taste better, what do? You add more salt to it. So gluten-free products tend to be higher in sodium than non-gluten-free products, simply because all of the processed crap that they put in there to make it gluten-free, because there are gluten-free grains. I mean, in general, when you use the whole grain, and gluten itself is, I actually wrote it down because I didn't want to forget it, is the protein that's produced when flour is mixed with water. It occurs in all grains. There are some grains that are the exception, like, what was the one? Buckwheat.
Buckwheat is.
And then there was another one called teff, which I'd never heard of. That's from like Ethiopia.
Sorghum is gluten-free.
Right. So there are a few, but it's a process. And the same with any other baking. If you grew up on white bread, it's not going to taste the same. It's just not. It's the same with if you grew up on a processed orange juice and you squeeze your own orange juice, it tastes completely different.
Totally different.
Or when the first time I had cranberry juice as an adult, like real legit cranberry juice, I about bit my tongue out. Like, holy, this is not sweet. This is not.
It's not the apple crayon that you're used to.
No, it was not at all. It was not at all. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. So that being said, I think that we're going to take a second here. I think Pete's got a couple words he wants to say for some sponsors, or no?
Well, yeah, we can do that right now, as a matter of fact. And take a moment here to say thank you to all the people that help us do what we do, having such a good time. And let Mary bring guests like Kim and do My LoSo Lifestyle. And some of those include, Stuckey's Family Restaurant, Stuckey's Bar and Grill, GRILLE.com, Stuckey'sBarandGrill.com. They're at 815-331-8050. Now, for all American cuisine made from scratch daily, visit them. They're easy to find right over at 4000 North Johnsburg Road, Johnsburg, Illinois. They share the same parking lot as Angelo's Supermarket. Stuckey's Family Restaurant, 815-331-8050. And of course, it's that time of year. What time of year? Well, it's tax season, and I'm sure you're all excited about that. I certainly know that Eric Mason is, because he's the CPA that runs Mobile Accounting. 224-321-6859. Mobile.tax. Experience, education, character, and inherent ability with numbers. An exceptional CPA. These are the reasons why business owners choose Eric Mason of Mobile Accounting for their bookkeeping, payroll, and tax services. Mobile Accounting, 224-321-6859. And now we'll go ahead and get back to My LoSo Lifestyle with Mary Schepp and her guest, Kim.
So, outside of, the obvious gluten, the evil gluten, the other one is always that breads make you fat.
Breads can make you fat.
Right. Well, anything. That's the thing, is anything can make you fat.
Exactly.
And it's funny to me when people comment about, and we were talking about this last night with like recipes, when someone says your recipe doesn't work. I tried it doesn't work. And I changed this, or I added this,
but I didn't have that.
Right. and I didn't have this, so I used that. And it didn't work out right. Well, it didn't work out right because you changed it. And it's the same with when people say that, breads make you fat. Well, if you eat, 4 pieces of toast with your breakfast, and it's a processed white bread that has no nutritional value or content whatsoever.
Lots of butter and lots of peanut butter and all that.
So you mean like good?
Yeah. Well, you wait till you taste this.
you know.
And then if you have 6 slices of this, you're probably going to poop a couple times, but it'll be fantastic for you.
It makes you look like old Uncle Pete.
Right, Uncle Pete. But that's the thing is the things that make you fat is a lot of times either genetics. Sometimes you just can't deny it. People have thyroid issues. There's different things that genetically you're going to be a heavier person, but you can combat that by what you put in your body. Mm-hmm. So when you have a whole grain, it is scientifically proven that it aids in heart health. Mm-hmm. Like me, in addition to having liver issues, I've had GI issues all my life. And when I started eating real food, and I fasted to discover, and that's how I discovered that I had nightshade sensitivity. By watching what I put in my body, it helped with my allergies and my GI tract. Mm-hmm. Because something as simple as saying, I love tomatoes. You think tomatoes are good for you. Fresh out of my garden, organic, no pesticides, no nothing. And that is true. But for somebody with a nightshade sensitivity, if you eat 16 tomatoes today because it sounded good and it's in your garden and it's free, and then you go and snuggle with your cat, you end up like me, who's going, how come I can't get rid of my allergies? And that is exactly why. You load yourself with histamines, mm-hmm. and you have that problem. And it's the same with the gluten. You load yourself with all of these chemically processed foods and inflammatory foods, and you're doing yourself such a injustice, because they do the whole grain promotes digestion. Mm-hmm. Everything just moves through you.
Mm-hmm. It works like a vacuum cleaner in your gut.
Right.
And it sucks up all the toxins on its way out.
Right.
As it goes through, and it does what it's supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And then when you don't have that, when you don't eat the fiber, when you don't eat a whole diet, then the foods that you eat sits in your gut, and then the toxins are absorbed through your colon. And that's where disease starts.
Right.
Because it has no way to move through and get out like it's supposed to.
Right. Mm-hmm. You got to have like the healthiest kids on the face of the planet. Just because of the breads that they eat. I mean, I swear that they're
pretty healthy, but I'm not going to, we have a lot of our treats
everybody
too.
Does. Everybody, well, you can't, mm-hmm. You can't just be like, this is the way it's going to be. And you can't ever have a piece of bread. You can't ever have a piece of this or a juice or a smoothie, mm-hmm. or, McDonald's or whatever. Yeah. Oh my gosh, crescent rolls. But the difference between, like serving sizes and portions and the product that you put into your body is completely different than just saying that it makes me fat. It's a complete lifestyle change. Mm-hmm. It's not just if I cut down from 4 pieces of bread to 2 pieces of bread, you can still have 4 pieces of bread. You just got to have the right kind of bread or the right kind of cookies.
Yeah. And look at your diet as a whole. And what else are you eating?
Right.
Are you eating that bowl of ice cream before you go to bed?
Right. Well,
You know?
I have had my fair share of, a bowl of ice cream with a couple cookies on top. And every once in a while, the other day, my husband said something about how I haven't had chocolate syrup in a while in the house. So lo and behold, what did I have to do? I had to go buy a stupid thing of chocolate syrup. So literally last week, I think I had a bowl of ice cream with 2 cookies and some chocolate syrup.
But you can do that because you know that is just a treat.
Right.
And the next day you're going to get up and you're going to go back to your normal lifestyle and how you eat. And it's not going to be detrimental. It's going to move through and your body's going to do what it has to do. And you move on.
And Gary over in Singapore says, well, bread with bacon. Yeah, bud, I'm right there with you. I love a bacon buddy. Just mayo and bacon on bread.
Tomato sandwiches.
Oh, I love those too. But if I don't have a tomato, I have no problem just slapping bacon on bread.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah.
I have no problem just slapping bacon. You put that right in your mouth. So
I did. Hopefully this summer I'll get a chance to get some pork belly from the butcher and actually make my own slab bacon, because you can. It's not the product that it is. It's the process that salts the bacon. So I've had low sodium bacon. I've had fresh pork belly, which is fantastic. But I would probably live on bacon if I could. My husband goes nuts when I have it in the house. Like what's the special occasion?
Like,
and of course I have to make the whole thing. He eats the whole pound and I get like my 2 little slices of it, which is sad, but that's okay.
You got to live with bacon.
Yes. So when you have those splurges, and it's not so much the carbs or the bread or any of that stuff. When you're looking at a lifestyle change, it's not easy. I had this conversation this morning with someone where everybody says, "Oh, you make it look so easy." The same as last night when I'm cooking in your kitchen. As we're having a conversation and you literally mill flour or throw in a thing, mix it up, put the lid on it. And the next thing you know, it's in the oven just through the time span of 2 people having a conversation. You go to a girlfriend's house to sit and have a cup of coffee and talk about life's woes. And it's no different, or making dinner. You know what I mean? It's when you make it a part of your process, and that's how it becomes easy. And it's a matter of confidence. Once you learn the confidence to make it, I'm sure you're like your aunt wrote a cookbook. How long have you been watching people cook in your kitchen where it just becomes your normal,
Yeah, I grew up in it, and it's what we know. So if you are now starting and say, well, right now I have 3 kids in high school and 1 in junior high, and this is all that they know. Their first foods, they all start on millet, which is a whole grain.
And also birdseed.
It's also birdseed.
I just learned that earlier. It's another one of those things. I knew it, but it didn't click in my head until you say, like, you hear the word and I go, holy crap, that legitimately is like, if I was starving and I had a bird, I could just steal their food.
Exactly. And I think you can buy that at like Fresh Thyme in the bulk.
It's funny that they sell it for the birds, but they don't sell it for us.
But millet is more prevalent. You can buy it more places. And it's so good. And like my kids, we are so simple in the way that we eat that if I make a big, huge recipe, like chances are I'm going to lose interest in making it because I can't focus that long to get all the ingredients in. But then the chance of my kids eating it is going to become less and less the more stuff I put in it. So we eat so simply. We make millet or quinoa with butter and salt, or olive oil and salt. I say salt, but that's how we do it in our house. Just the basic foods that are just whole. And they all the kids started, that was their first food, was millet, and I would just cook it up, and that's what they would eat. It was like a cereal.
Well, it's funny that you say salt, because it's not something that you have to eliminate. I eliminate it because of the fact that my liver literally backs up everything in my body like a traffic jam going down to one lane, and it just sits in my blood. It doesn't go anywhere, which makes me retain water. So it's a means to an end. So it's not that I can't have salt. I just have to limit it. And even the recipe that you made, and I'll post it later so everybody can see it. It's not a salt free, but even by adding salt, it still comes out to like 100 milligrams of sodium per slice.
Yeah, there was about a tablespoon in 9 loaves.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you take that out, and when you look at like a Kaiser roll from the grocery store, on average, those are 350 to 500 milligrams of sodium for one hamburger bun. So ultimately, even though you use salt, and you could easily take that down to a teaspoon or less just to still enhance the flavor of the grains themselves and get the flavor you want. For somebody like me who's got an unsalted palate, I could guarantee you I could eliminate the salt completely and it would be perfectly fine. The same with my husband. He's gotten so used to not having salt that it doesn't even matter. But the things like that where you think that it's got to be all or nothing, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You take the baby steps and say, okay, you don't have to make it salt-free right off the bat, and you don't have to make some artisan French loaf that takes 3 days to ferment. You can start with a quick bread just to have that success, or a pizza dough. Pizza dough is the easiest thing. You want to start something, start with a pizza dough. You can literally put it in just about any mixture. You can find a recipe in every cookbook, salt or no salt, and you're on the path to making something that's absolute. And you don't even have to start with milling your own flour. That just to me is fantastic. I think Kim and we were talking last night that it's probably dangerous that we're friends because we might start a movement here in our area for stuff. You know, it's kind of a funny thing, but to be able to taste the difference between a fresh product.
But I have to say, you are not going to get the same results if you bought whole grain flour from the grocery store.
Right.
You won't.
It's still processed.
And it's not going to be the same flavor. So you can't take, say, my bread recipe and go buy 10 pounds or 5 pounds of whole grain flour. It's not the same.
Right.
It's not the same.
That's the other thing is weights. So when you mill a flour, it's not settled. It's light. It's fluffy. Even a heavier grain that's going to produce a heavier bread, it's still light, fluffy, fresh milled, like something. Even if you sift a bag of commercially made flour, it is still not as light and fluffy. It's kind of like when you see something that's been polished. And the same thing happens with grains of commercial flour is over time in the bags, and everything is polished and settled in it. It's a more compact thing versus when you fresh mill something, you have this huge bowl. And if you scoop 5 cups out of that to make flour for a recipe that says you need 5 cups of flour, you have to go by weight.
You have to go by weight.
That's
more prevalent if you're making gluten-free bread. Like the stuff that we made last night, we go by texture and how it looks.
Right.
But if you're making, say, a cake, or if you're making anything that is more exact, like baking that way, then you need to go by weight.
Well, that's the same thing with salt. Like with breads, with baking in general, with anything in general, if you're going to use a salt, I still recommend using salts of the earth. We had a show about removing iodine from your diet. We are no longer in a time frame where there's food shortages and epidemics, and where people will literally live on potatoes because that's what they had. And the epidemic was more in the central parts of the country where you're not close to the sea, where a lot of iodine is. So it's not really as much of an issue as it used to be, but it's still a processed product. And when you take table salt, is a very small grain, and it's basic science. They're smaller, so you can fit more of them into one spot. So if you have a tablespoon of table salt and a tablespoon of sea salt or Celtic salt or gray salt. So if you're going to use salts, I would still use the salt of the earth, the Himalayan salt, the Celtic salt, the pink salt, something of that nature. For those things. And the same thing, weigh them out. Get yourself a scale and look at the tablespoon of salt versus a weighted salt. And you can see the difference between the two because it's significant.
It is.
And I love my scale. That's how I learned about salsa. A serving of salsa is 2 tablespoons.
That's like one bite.
What evil person is it? Some person at the FDA or wherever is in charge of creating serving sizes. And Pete and I have had lengthy
Who
conversations.
goes, oh, 1 tablespoon.
Yeah.
That's really good. 1 tablespoon.
Yeah.
Okay, that's enough. I'm full.
I'm sorry.
I
Couldn't
Well, here-
possibly.
The thing that's funny to me is you're allowed, 12 to 16 potato chips, depending on the bag of potato chips you buy or make. Fresh potato chips are fantastic. And you're allowed 2 tables. So you get enough salsa for 2 potato chips. And it's the same with a sandwich. When I first did this, and I literally got laughing in my kitchen because I made a sandwich and I looked at my husband. I said, "Doesn't that look tasty?" And it was a slice of bread, because on the back of a commercial bread loaf, one slice is a serving. So it was a slice of bread, a tablespoon of mayonnaise, 5 slices of ham, and a piece of cheese. And I fold it in half, and it made the ugliest sandwich ever. And then, of course, they said, well, if you're going to put a serving of tomato, it's almost an entire tomato. So it's this is the most ridiculous sandwich on the face of the
You have
planet.
to eat it with a fork.
And I mean, I get that they come up with serving sizes because of weights. At 6 ounces or 4 ounces is serving. And that Pete almost cried when I told him that a serving size should fit in the palm of your hand. And he says, "You're being funny, right? You're kidding, right?"
Yeah, and that's not a
No. Yeah,
That's
I think
just
your response
no.
was, "I don't even have big hands. That's just not enough."
Yeah. So
Yeah, but yeah, so when it's funny talking about weights and measuring things. You would think that making bread has to be, you always hear it on the food shows. It's a science. There is science behind it and the reactions that happen in these things, but it's not like that. It's not, if you have a tablespoon too much flour. Last night you messed up the bread. All cards on the table. She screwed up my bread. We're sitting there and you just get to,
paying attention.
right. We're chatting and talking about all these different things and, grandiose dreams of building a bakery, and the bakery turned into 17 million other things all in one time, which is why it's dangerous for us to talk. But, all of a sudden you look over, you're like, holy crap, I didn't add enough flour. And you fixed it. And you wouldn't know. Nobody would ever know. But that's the thing that you get, and not just in baking or everything. And here's the whole, life lesson thing. Those things that happen, and you just add a little more, take a little out, do a little whatever, and you roll with it. The end of the world didn't happen. The sky didn't fall, your house didn't blow up, and holy crap, we still made good bread. You didn't need to throw a fit over it, and it was fantastic. And that's what's so funny to me is so many people tell me I don't have the time, or it's too exact. And how many people have you ever had terrified to make bread that have come through your kitchen and you taught them how to make bread?
You're like, wow, that's so easy.
Right. And that's how you became the bread lady. So are you going to go back to being the bread lady?
I always toy with it. I love making bread, and how joyfully well, the name is only a couple years old. And that came to be when I did go back to work at the funeral home. Actually went to work at the funeral home. And then being so busy there, I lost what brought me joy at home. I love my job, and I love walking through the journey with the families that I walk, the journey with, where they're saying goodbye to their loved ones. But I lost the joy of being a homemaker and feeding my family and playing with recipes and teaching people how to do the same thing. So that's when I went part-time at the funeral home. That's when I launched Joyfully Well, and just finding joy in your everyday of what you have to do. And I love making bread. And when I'm in my kitchen, and when people like you last night are in my kitchen, it is so much fun for me to show you what I can do. And then was your text surprising to me when you got home and tried it? Absolutely not, because that is what everybody says. And oh my gosh, my kids ate it. Oh my gosh, my husband loves it. And it's an investment, it is to make it exactly how I do it. It is going to be an investment. And talking to so many wives and women over the last 20 years, they're always like, I can't spend that. I can't invest in a machine. And it's just a mixer. Like my mixer was just a normal mixer. It just has the right dough hook and the power to develop the gluten in whole grain bread. And I always would tell him, like, okay, well, if your husband, speaking of husbands here, if they had to build something in their garage, or if they had to cut a 2x4, they would go to Home Depot and they would buy a saw. And how much would that saw cost? It would be a few $100s just to cut this piece of wood.
Right.
Like, you have to think about that in your kitchen. You need the tools to make you successful, because if you don't have the tools that are going to make it easier and help you be successful, you're not going to do it. You're going to get frustrated and it's not going to work.
It's funny that when you talk about the cost of things, and for, the better part of 15 years or so, I did finance. And when I would help people figure out where their money was going, and I would always do, and it's to say, I've moved that into my food world and said, I'm happy to help you, but I can't help you if you don't know what you're eating. Track your food. I'm not asking you to change anything. Eat your soda, eat your McDonald's, eat your whatever. Do you, but track it and be honest. Because that's the one thing that people aren't, is they're not honest with themselves. And they say, oh yeah, well, I tracked it and I put that I used a tablespoon of oil. Well, I watched you and that was about a quarter cup of oil that you threw in there to fry your potatoes. So you need to be honest and say that. And it was the same with money. I want you to write down every single penny that you spend. And I remember I had a client, and she spent almost $375 a month on magazines at the checkout line at the grocery store. She didn't think about it. They're $4, $5, $6, sometimes $10 a piece. But when you go grocery shopping for your family and you spend, $150 to $300, you don't miss $10 or $5 or $3. So she would spend this and didn't think anything of it. And she's like, well, I get justice out of those things. I get something. I read them. I learn something, recipes, whatever it may be. Like, there's a million other, go to a library, get a magazine subscription for the year. And because you are spending more than you are on a car payment. So if you cut out that one thing, that's going to save you financially. Same with coffee. If you spend your money on coffee every day at Starbucks, doesn't mean you have to eliminate going to Starbucks. But if you cut back and instead of going 5 times a week, you went 2 times a week. And now at the end of the month, you have your mill or your food processor or your mixer, whatever you want. You just have to pay attention to what it is in your life and plan accordingly to those things.
You have to prioritize what is important to you.
Right. Like a food meal, which I texted. I literally sent you a message this morning and said, so what food meal do I need? Which I swear to God, my husband listens to the show, and the fact that I say I'm going to get a grain mill, he's probably, Googling divorce lawyers as we speak, because as it is,
he'll appreciate it.
He will. And he truly, truly will. But I have so many food gadgets, because on my food journey, it's like, I want to make bread. So I bought a bread maker. I have a fantastic bread maker, and I've made a decent amount of bread in it. But then I slowly discovered I have a quick bread recipe that I converted to be low sodium, and I don't need the bread maker. It takes 10 minutes in my KitchenAid mixer, and I don't like the tall stand-up loaf. I want to make it however I make it. So now I have, a $200 machine sitting in my closet that I don't use. And I have all of these things that I've tried them and I learned something, and I don't regret purchasing them. But at the same time, I have
You're the same way that I am.
I have a plethora of these things. Now my friends all get to benefit from this because of the fact that, once I no longer serve a purpose, I usually end up giving them to them. But yeah, my path of figuring out, and my mixer, and my husband can't deny this because he's already had to take it apart and put it back together. I blew out the second gear in my mixer of all things making bread.
That'll do it to your KitchenAid.
Yeah. So I have first and then third gear. I don't, I don't have
Who needs second anyway?
I don't have second gear on my mixer.
And Kent there says, I love this bread lady. And I'm sure he's talking about you there, Kim. And he says, what's in her loaf? Find out today at 3:30 right here at 21.6 the net.
Hey, thanks, Ken. Thanks for the shameless plug.
Yeah, shameless plug.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't mind it.
Yeah, well, you're also biased as well there, so that's okay. You will have to.
I have a redhead though, just so you know.
Well, then you're almost perfect. So there's nothing better than now. None of my kids are. My brother's kids are all, but I'm the only ginger in our immediate family. But my wife and I, they all got the dark Italian hair. So,
That's funny.
yeah.
I'm kind of partial to them.
So
Well, I mean, they are yours. So that's kind of the thing. That's the joke in our house is that my sister was the milkman's daughter because she's blonde and the rest of us are not. But as a little boy, my father was blonde. And as he grew up, he grew out of that blonde and got rid, it just was one of those things. So it's just the gene that she got. But yeah, and the funny thing is the two of us standing next to each other look so much alike. Like I actually took one of those Barbie programs and made my hair blonde and gave me blue eyes. And my husband says, don't you ever do it again. He's like, I didn't marry your sister. It's just creepy. He's like, now I'm going to forever see the fact that the two of you, we sound identical. If she called you right now, we sound identical. But then my oldest sister, who is a brunette, everybody says, oh, you two look alike because we're both brunettes. She's about this much shorter than I am. And you can tell we're related, but we don't look the same as my sister who's blonde and I. So that's pretty funny.
No, I can relate to that. My sister's brunette and I'm not. And everyone says we look the same. And I don't see it.
Every time I see you, I want to let all my grays come out and have a nice, big, beautiful mane of silver. It'll happen someday. Just not yet. Yeah. Just not yet.
Yeah, I like the white. I feel like I earned all this, man.
Right?
Yeah.
So, they're badge of honor.
Go white. They don't go gray.
No.
So, but yeah, I earned this. Jack,
all the 20-somethings that say they love my hair, I say, well, or they'll ask me how many times I had to go to the salon to get it this color. And I'm like, well, you have to start going gray when you're about 18. Yeah. And maybe by the time you're my age, you might be there.
Right. It's funny. It just clicked in my head, all this talk about our hair color and everything like that. And one of the things that I learned early on with my liver, because it has so much to do with the hormones and everything in my body. I lose my hair easy. So I went through a period of time where I was losing my hair at an alarming rate. And I told my husband, I said, if this keeps happening, if it keeps up at this pace, I'm just going to let you shave my head. I'm not going to deal with it. I don't care. It's hair, whatever.
It can be any color you want.
Right. And he was kind of excited about it. Like, I don't want that to happen for you. But yeah, I kind of want to shave your head. That would be like, who gets to shave their wife's head? But once I found this,
it's a monthly thing. It's just something you do. What? Not every married couple does that.
Yeah, right. But through the process of learning the balance of my diet and learning that it wasn't just the salt in my diet that affected my liver or my water or my weight gain or loss, it was everything. And fiber was a huge part of that. If I get about 23 grams of fiber a day, I am perfect. Any more or any less, and I have serious gut issues. And that took a process for me to find out. But I also discovered that fiber in eating real grains, and it's funny now making this almost full circle, to creating my own bread with grains, by finding those whole grains to get the proper fiber in my diet, my hair grew back. And that falling out stopped because the nutrient balance and the biotin and the thiacine or something like that in my body balanced out to the point where, combined with the omegas that I needed in the vitamin B, my hair grew back.
Your body knows what it needs to do when you treat it right. And we feed it.
Right. It's fascinating to me that balance. And it's not easy. You have to find that balance. It is a process. But once, it's like anything else. I hate to bring up the proverbial riding a bike, but it seems like such a daunting task. And I specifically myself remember being terrified. And the first time I did it, and I was so excited. And I looked back at my sister and her friends and said, holy crap, I'm doing it. And I hit a train of mailboxes, literally slid across the mailboxes on my belly. But it seemed so daunting. Like the bread, talking to my husband about it. It seems terrifying. But then I go over to your house like this. I should have known this. It's no different than me grinding my own coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
I want good coffee. We've learned that it tastes better. So we grind our own coffee.
And it's not going to be rancid or spoiled when you grind it yourself. Yeah.
So when people look at me and go, holy crap, you grind your own coffee, that takes too long. Nope. It can be easy. It's just a lifestyle
And
change.
we
It's
got
pretty good.
just about a minute here. So how do they reach my LoSo Lifestyle, and how do they reach Kim with Joyfully Well?
So my LoSo Lifestyle, my Facebook page, my YouTube page, soon to be, hopefully, we'll see a website here in the near future. And then, of course, 216 The Net. Download the app. You can listen to us anytime, every Thursday, 11 o'clock. And then Kim with Joyfully Well on her Facebook page, which is fantastic. And hopefully much, much, much more to come. Any other ways they can find you?
You can message me or my normal Facebook. It's
Yes.
Kim Anderson Nordin.
Yes.
Or usually the Joyfully Well through my Facebook page is easy as well.
And we got our tag.
Instagram is Joyfully Well with Kim, which is very similar to my Facebook page.
And you can find her all over on my page. So if you're already on my page, go there and you'll find Kim Nordin.
Awesomeness. Well, thank you very much for another awesome episode of My LoSo Lifestyle with Mary Schepp and special guest Kim
Thank you
Nordin.
so much. This was fun.
I love it.
There we go.
Thanks,
Well,
guys.
We'll say so long to everybody out there. You had a nice big crowd today. And there's Kristen saying hi. Kent said hi many, many times. And of course, we had Gary all the way from Singapore watching, and loved that Gary checked in. Mike said hello. And then also Deb said hello, and Hal said hello. So you had a nice big crowd today.
Cool beans.
Awesome.
Very good.
Later, folks.
See ya.
Bye.
Yeah, the station, and it took me a while to get used to that because the radio is the radio.
Mhm.
So it is 11 to 12 on the radio. If you're still talking,
It's over.
it's done. Something else plays. And then the YouTube,